Welcome to Last First Date Radio, featuring interviews with experts in dating, relating, and mating in midlife. And now, here's your host, Sandy Weiner.
This is episode number 410 with Jill Sherer Murray, How to Attract Big Wild Love. Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Weiner, and welcome to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late for love, and that a woman of value naturally attracts the respect and rewards she deserves in life and in love. Speaking of woman of value, I have a new book out. It's called Becoming a Woman of Value, How to Thrive in Life and Love, and it's now available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. It is filled with 30 fabulous tips on how to be a woman of value, how to really step into your value and thrive, whether you're single or in a relationship, whether you're young or old. And each chapter has an exercise to help you to really step into that value that you already have. So I would love for you to purchase a copy and write a review. That would be awesome. And this week's tip on becoming a woman of value is be aware of your tone. We have, tone of voice is everything. And I remember years ago, my kids used to say, "Mom, your tone of voice is really bad." And I would think, well, I'm not screaming, but I was holding back, right? It was just like, I was kind of like screaming under my voice, under my tone. So our tone of voice really affects how people hear us, how we convey what's important to us. So my challenge to you this week is to be aware of your tone of voice when you're having a difficult conversation, especially. Try to get yourself back to center before you have that conversation. So you're not like seething with resentment when you're saying, "I love you, honey. It's really, everything's fine." And before I bring on Jill, I just want to give a shout out to my awesome Facebook group. It's called Your Last First Date. And we are a group for women over 40 who want to really grow into being a woman of value in their lives and in their love life. And it's a group where we don't tolerate disrespect or unkindness. So if you want positive support, come to Your Last First Date on Facebook. And now for my guest, Jill Sherer Murray. She has been on the show before. She's also been on the Women of Value podcast, and I love her so much. 400
times.
That's right. I love her so much. She's here again. She is so fabulous. You are going to love her. I will put the links to our other shows in the show notes, but Jill is a TEDx speaker. She's an author. She's a coach. She founded a company called Let Go For It. It's a lifestyle brand dedicated to helping people let go for a better life. She's also an award-winning journalist and a communications leader, and she can trace practically every success that she has had in her career and her love life to letting go. Her TEDx talk is called The Unstoppable Power of Letting Go. It's been viewed by millions of people. And her self-help book, Big Wild Love, just got released in May this year. So welcome back to the show, Jill.
I love how you were like, this is my guest today is Jill Sherer Murray, and this is our 400th show. And I'm like, yes, it is our 400th show.
Some guests are just so good. You got to keep having them back on, because what can you get accomplished in a half an hour? I mean, seriously. Jill and I can talk for hours.
I know we can do 400 hours, Sandy. I know.
That's right, and we're going to. That's our goal in life. We're going to let go and go for 400.
That's it. And then have half, and then share a cupcake.
Oh, I like the cupcakes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So
right.
Of course I'm happy to be here. I'm always happy to be here with you. So much to talk about all the time.
Yes. Thank you. So Jill, for people who don't know, can you share the little cliff notes of your story about letting go, and then we'll move on to some juicy questions about lots of other stuff.
Okay, good. Yeah. So when I was in my early 40s, I let go of a relationship with a wonderful man that I was with for 12 years. After I finally allowed myself to see the actual truth that I wanted to get married and he didn't. And there was nothing I was going to ever do that was going to change his mind. So I had a very large moment of reckoning and realization. And upon that moment of epiphany, I decided to let go of him and an entire life that I had around him in another city, and start all over again. And as part of the process of doing that, I wound up finding the love that I really wanted, which is what I now call big wild love, which is actually the love that I needed for myself. And so I worked very hard to cultivate big wild love so that I would make different choices going back out into the world of dating and beyond. And eventually, within not really very long, probably within the next year, I met the man that I would finally marry. And we've been married happily for almost 15 years, which I can't believe, which is just insane. Slow down time, although 2020 is doing a good job of that. And so what really came from that experience, and so many others really since then, is an understanding and a realization that there is so much power in both cultivating big wild love, which is actually not love with another person, but love for ourselves that we need so badly before we could even think about doing anything else. And then the power of letting go, that it's just this unbelievable combination that if you put them together, then you will always find your way to the things that you want in life. And I've experienced that on so many levels, in that relationship, in my marriage, in my career, letting go of a full-time day job like a crazy person, thinking all these things right before 2020, all smacked us down, but, still having those tools of big wild love and letting go have just continued to serve over and over and over. So, so that's my thing. That's my story.
I love your story. And,
yeah,
so many people live in that place of fear of letting go. I just recently had a conversation with a woman who was seeking coaching, and she's still married. She is unhappy. She's been married for decades to a man who is totally not there for her. And the thought of leaving him without having someone else is really, really scary. So what would you say to someone like that who is like stuck in this place where they're not supported, they're really unhappy, the cost of staying is huge, but the thought of leaving is frightening?
Yeah. I mean, so what I would say to that person is kudos to them for seeking coaching and support, because, I think sometimes even if we do have, what we think is the most idyllic support system, they're like friends and family. Those aren't the people that I necessarily think we should always be turning to anyway, to be making those very large life choices. So what I love about her is that I see glimmers of big wild love just in the fact that she reached out to you. And, the other thing I would say to her is, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to, find yourself at the edge of the cliff and kind of be looking over and thinking, I know there's a fire behind me, but I'm not doing that. That's okay, because things don't have to happen overnight. And so I think sometimes people feel like when they're in that space of, I'm unhappy and I know I need to let go, but I'm scared, I'm really afraid of what's going to happen to me. It's not like you have to jump off that cliff tomorrow. There's a process involved in letting go that allows you to work through what you need to work through so that you have the grounding that you need when the time is right then to make that break. But there's a part of time that you need to put your arms around a plan and to say, I'm going to do this, and it feels hard and heavy, but it won't always feel that way, because the things I don't have now, I have the capability to corral for myself. And to me, and I always talk about it, and you've heard it over and over on our 372nd show, which is, that's why I talk about big wild love so much, because it really does, you know, when we go to the edge of that cliff and we look over and we don't see the net, we're not jumping. If we give ourselves time to go through that process and get the help that we need, when we get to that edge of the cliff again, we're not looking for that safety net because we know that we are the safety net. And so I love that she's reached out to you for coaching. I hope that's something that she is like really celebrating herself for, because it's not easy to do. And that, you know, I say like asking for help and good credit are the keys to life. You know, like I ask everyone for help. I will walk down the street. If I can't find myself to the next street, I'll stop anyone and say, help me. I don't know where I am. So I think, you know, people, and, you know, again, I mean, when I have struggles or I need help, you know, I mean, I turn to my friends and family to a point, but even if you have the best circle in the whole world, there are still times that it's very appropriate to go beyond to somebody who actually knows how to get you from point A to point B. So that's what I would say. That would be my advice. Yeah.
Well, I love that you celebrate people who ask for help, because
yes, I do.
So many of us don't, right? And
it
takes courage to say, I'm stuck and I don't know how to get out. The other thing that you said that is so important is to have a plan and to really love ourselves more. Like, we have to have that big wild love within. And it's missing in so much of us, especially when we've been in long relationships that have been so unfulfilling and so draining personally.
Right.
And sometimes, you know, the fear, it's bigger than just the relationship. There's so many others. And our family and friends who want the best for us often give us horrible advice. I was just telling a friend that when my son decided not to go to college, I got a lot of pushback from good friends who said, you know, that's not a good idea. That's really, how is he going to have any kind of security if he doesn't go to college? That was their fear talking.
That's right.
And it wasn't what was best for my son. I knew that deep down, because I know him, that if school is not for him, he does have to have a plan, but it doesn't have to be the one that works for my friend. It has to be the one that works for him. And we all need to remember that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, it's such an interesting thing, because it's scary to let go. I mean, it really is. And we have these such amazing expectations of ourselves that are just so unrealistic. You know, letting go, and I always say this, is about risk and loss. And you have to be able to bear it. You have to be ready to, you know, walk your way through it. And that requires you to have certain skills and certain abilities and certain beliefs. And, you know, when I talk about big wild love, you know, we talk so much about self-love these days. I mean, it's, you know, it can be a very Pollyanna, superficial, you know, oh, we must, you know, love and light, we must love ourselves. But I'm talking about a very functional kind of self-love that really allows you, in my opinion, to get to two basic things. And the first one is to understand what you believe about yourself and what you believe is possible for yourself and what you believe you deserve. So it's really understanding those beliefs, which we do not reflexively do. Like, cavemen who heard rustling in the bushes did not stop and say, do I believe that there's an animal in the bush? Like, they just automatically like went into fight mode.
Run away.
And right. But, you know, we don't understand what we believe, which is a problem, which is, so we are like mindlessly, and I don't say that meanly or with judgment, but, you know, with no real consciousness, making certain choices. And the other thing we don't know about ourselves is we have no idea what we want. And so big wild love is about really making strides in both of those places, so you can really be in service of yourself. So I love a massage. I love a great night out with my friends. I sure wouldn't mind going to a restaurant right about now. But that's self-care, and that's not really the kind of self-love that big wild love is. It's about doing some deeper work, and we don't do that in 5 minutes. So, if you're afraid to let go and you're just sort of coming around to that idea, then you need time to do that work that you need to do to be okay to finally, extricate yourself from that which is not serving. And I just think it's really interesting. And I was telling you before we actually got on, people sing that song to me constantly. It is just a constant. And they're always like, if I have a moment, because I'm human, of course I do, and it's like, let it go. And I'm like, no, it's not that simple. It takes time. So give yourself the time, and putting that arm up in the sand and saying, help me, is a great first step. Perfect. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. People are so afraid to ask for help, but
I used to run a communications team, and I would say to them, if you don't understand, ask for help, and just, they don't.
We're not raised to believe that what's important to us matters. Raised to believe that what's important to everybody else is what we need to be doing, right?
That's right. Oh yes, that's right. Especially as women, for sure. Yeah. And yes, we're definitely not from the generation of, I know my mother, walks around saying, I don't know how she got this way. I don't know how that happened. And I said, well, I had to be like a self-cleaning oven, I had to kind of figure it all out for myself. But, and so it is hard. And I think we don't always allow ourselves to voice what we're really thinking or feeling, or asking for what we want, or for what we need, or for how we want to engage with another person. And we make it so much bigger than it ever is, because we just don't believe that we're worthy of asking for those things. Yeah. And, it takes time to get to that point of saying, which is your life's work, we're valuable enough to explain or reach out for help, or tell another person, this is how I work, and this is how I hope that you will honor me and my boundaries and communicate with me. And that's really a gift to another person, because they don't know, people don't know what we need unless we voice it and we speak up about it. And it doesn't have to be, with pots and pans, clanging and screaming. There are a myriad of ways to explain to another person, kind of, here are the ground rules. And I know when people tell me who they are, or how they like to be communicated with, or how they would like me to work with them. That is just such precious information. And by them telling me, they have just saved me so much time and energy, and potentially aggravation, because now I'm very clear on what's expected. And there's ways to do that in a very, very assertive and honorable way. So I'm all about it. I'm all about it. And that just gets really bad as you get older, because then you really just have to be careful.
No filter.
You got to remind yourself, put the filter on a little bit. But anyway.
But what you said is really important, that there is a good way to do this. There are many ways to do this. And the way not to do it is to hold it in for 6 months or 6 years and then implode.
Right.
And people go like, who are you? I never saw this part of you. I didn't even know you needed these things. I had no clue. So we really need to practice and get the skills to own who we are, to speak up about it, to be able to give people the clear operating manual, so they don't have to guess who we are, what we need. And we want that back. And we'll start getting it back the more we practice this.
And I think it's really important to your point of, we're holding it in, to ask the question is why? Why are we not speaking up? Why are we holding it in? Why are we sitting on what we need or what we feel? Why? And not a why in terms of how our not doing that is going to impact another person, because that doesn't matter ever. But it's really why, what inside of us. Because if we're someone who is not able to go to our boss or to a friend or to a partner in a relationship and say, hey, I'm feeling this, then we're not going to get anywhere bigger. We're not going to find our way to the place that we really need to be. So I always find, especially after I let go of my relationship, was always the most important question to me when I found myself, before I met my husband, just dating. And my natural instinct was to be like, why did he say that? Why isn't he calling? Why doesn't he like me? And until I would catch myself and say, wait a minute, why is that important to me? Why after one date am I giving over, hours of my life to another person who's probably, sitting on a bench somewhere, not thinking about me, or maybe, breaking a heart of someone else, who knows? But they're all choices that we get to make. And when we start to cultivate the big, wild, loving parts of ourselves, those choices slowly become more reflexive. And so the script kind of flips. And so it's not so much about how am I going to hurt him? How am I going to approach my boss with this information? It's more about how am I going to honor myself and get what I need from this relationship? And you will automatically, as a grown-up and as a big, wild, loving person, know to do that in a respectful way. So the question why, we start out as like 5-year-olds saying why? And then somewhere along the way, we stop asking that question. But I think it's a very useful one as we get older, and especially in dating, because people are, who knows what their motivate, who knows why someone with all the great, ghosts us or doesn't call back or does what they or said, who knows? We'll never know. We'll never know. So the question always has to come back onto us.
Yeah, it's a great distinction. I think we, again, tend to be other focused. And when we're other focused, we abandon ourselves. So instead of asking the questions that can't be answered, those
right,
are low value questions. Why did he do this? Who does
right,
that? Why did that happen? And I saw a client do it today. She made up a whole story about why the guy didn't call when he said he was going to call. And so she reached out and she said, I was really surprised you didn't call me. And so it's like, because she made up the story, she was angry. If she hadn't made up that story and just said, okay, he didn't call me. Am I looking for somebody who doesn't call when they say they will? No, that's not on my list.
Right.
So accountability is one of my must-haves. Oh, so I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go. And if he decides to call me, then we can have a talk about like how it's important for me to have men follow through. That's an important quality. I really like when men do that. Otherwise, you're giving up your power all the time.
Yeah. So, and your life and moments of your life. Life is
can't
short.
Get that back. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, excuse me. Something came up in my group today, in my Facebook group, and I wanted to talk to you about it. And this woman, one of my monitors, wrote a post about let it go versus let it be. And she wrote that Eckhart Tolle had written, sometimes letting things go is an act of far greater power than defending or hanging on, which I love. And the Beatles have a song, Let It Be. And so she's hearing the song and she's thinking like, is there a difference between let it be and let it go? And she also said something that I thought was interesting, because the whole conversation was around how somebody tells you to let it go. So she wrote, to me, let it be implies that we acknowledge the hurt, anger, disappointment we may be feeling and accept and move on, rather than let it go, which to her implied not acknowledging our feelings. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that part of letting it go, because it's a very different take on letting it go. And the difference between let it go and let it be.
Yeah. So I think, I kind of love that she said that let it go is about not acknowledging our feelings, because in my process and in my world, that is the wrong way to let it go. I think
just get over it.
Right. Which I think I saw her post. I think she said it was a very diminishing thing to say to another person.
Yeah.
And I really don't disagree with that in the sense that, as we use that phrase casually, as we throw it out in life on the little things, in quotation marks, it's so easy to just say, well, just let it go. But letting go of something requires you to be with it, and requires you to be with it in as many different ways as you can inside of a very reasonable time period, of course. But, tapping kind of follows, emotional freedom technique kind of follows the same strategy, right? Which is, in my letting go process, this is actually my step 2, which is the first step. Step 1 is epiphany, which means you come to the realization one way or another that it's time to let go of something. Before you can move forward to the next thing, you can't do that without step 2, or you'll just find yourself right back in the soup. And step 2 is really feeling anything you need to feel around the idea of letting it go, which is, feeling, I say this all the time. I mean, when I let go of my relationship, I was, snotty and, full of pizza all the time on the sofa, watched a lot of Lifetime television over and over again until I couldn't take it anymore. But it's really having the spectrum of feelings that you need to have. I mean, I went through it with the pandemic, for the first month or 2, knowing that I was finally having a book published, and all the work that I had done leading up to it, and the feeling of loss and grief that it was not going to go out into the world the way that I had spent so much time planning for, having to cancel events. And, my parents were sick last year and they were still here. I would say, just stay alive till May, and so I had to feel the feels, because otherwise there was no getting past it. It's like, I talk about it in my book, as the tunnel of pain. Like, there's no way around the tunnel. Like, you just have to walk through it. And so I think truly letting go is about acknowledging your feelings. It's mostly about acknowledging your feelings, because letting something go is about true detachment. And in order to have true detachment, you have to go through those cycles. So in terms of let it be, I mean, to me, that's just a way of saying, you're not going to change that. You're not going to control that. It is what it is. Just let it be what it is. And if you have something around it being what it is that you need to let go of, then that's the work. But letting something be is, I guess in my mind, I never really thought about it before, but I guess in my mind, it's sort of an admonishment of, this is what it is, and I'm not going to change it, and you're not going to change it. And I can accept that this is what it is, or I could not accept what it is. And if it really impedes me in my life in any way, then I need to let it actually go. And that's a whole different bag. So, but when people sing me that song, or just say, oh, just let it go, and especially knowing that I've literally written a book on it, I don't know if it's the book, but I've written a book. I think, it's a bigger thing. I mean, I know we're being light about it, but it's a bigger task than most people will acknowledge.
Yeah, it's to me, and it's interesting. Thanks for sharing your perspective. I think a lot of people do the same thing with just be you. Mm-hmm. And it's the hardest thing, because what I am being me, but I'm not really, because I have all this fear and I have all these veils that are getting in the way of really being me. But how do I take those off? Mm-hmm. So it's, there's fear in letting go. There's fear in having faith. There's fear in showing up. There's fear in all these things, but there's also ways to build a foundation to keep strong, so that you don't feel like you're jumping off a tightrope with no net. I mean, because that's how most people feel. Oh, just let go? Are you crazy?
Right.
I can't just let go of everything. I mean, when I got divorced, I let go of a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I had a divorce settlement. I didn't have zero money. I had some.
Mm-hmm.
I had the security of a house, which was
Mm-hmm.
helpful. And I had a coaching career that was just starting. I had no idea how to make a business work. I had no idea that whether I was going to find a man or not. Like all those things were big unknowns, just like for you. But
Right.
I knew that I couldn't stay where I was. That was taking too big of a toll on who I was, and I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
do it anymore. So it's the hope of something else. It's the dream of something else. It's the fact that staying stuck is worse than moving forward.
Right.
That helps us to really get out of a rut.
Right. That's it completely. And, people are afraid of that again, because they don't, I mean, I talk about this in my TEDx actually, where I say, let go of being something you're not, let go of what other people think, let go of, the need to be perfect, let go of these things. And I know that they're hard, and they never stop. We're always, listen, we're wired to always care what other people think. We're always going to care about what other people think of us to a degree. The issue is, do we let what other people think stop us from being and doing what we want, and allowing the true self to do whatever we want to do in our lives without, judgment? I mean, there are always going to be people that are going to weigh in with their opinions. And to your point, it's never, ever about us. It's always about them, which is why I always come back to Big Wild Love, because when you have that, you no longer come at it from a place of fear. You no longer come at it from a place of scarcity. You no longer think about it in terms of how you might be hurt or affected negatively in response. You might come at it now from well, you know what? Not everyone's going to like me. I say it in my talk. I have an enormous gargantuan personality. Some people have no idea what to do with that. And I used to shrink myself down, but now I don't do that anymore. I use my big personality appropriately. Like, I don't get up in the middle of a funeral and start singing or whooping or anything, but
I'm so glad to hear that.
not usually, but I mean,
you could do that at my funeral if you
okay. It's like it takes the charge out of everything. The stakes become much lower. You become much less afraid, and you start to really trust in your own voice and your own self and your own capacity for knowledge and, to be helpful. I remember when I was in my job, and I remember that when I first started in my job, I remember being in a meeting and thinking to myself, these people are talking about something, it's wrong. This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea. And I remember saying, well, don't say anything, Jill. Shh, don't say anything. You just sit there and be quiet for a change. And then I thought to myself, no, I'm right. And so I spoke up. And I remember, and I'm saying this because I remember that moment so clearly, because I felt like it was one of the first times ever in a business meeting that I actually had the dialogue with myself in my head that said, no, you're right. Trust what you know. And I spoke up, and I have continued to have that dialogue in my head. And whenever I start to think, don't say anything. No, it's okay. You're right. And I don't mean that from I'm always right. I mean that from a trust your own sense of self and truth and knowledge and what you know and who you are. And don't be afraid of that. Don't worry about the outside world. We're all going to do that no matter what. It's just part of it. But if you can remind yourself to have that awareness and to remind yourself to take a step back, even in your mind, before you are fearful, and say, what am I afraid of? What is the worst thing that's going to happen to me? Someone isn't going to like me? I mean, sometimes people don't like you. There's there's no rhyme or reason. Maybe you look like their cousin's brother's nephew that stole your lipstick. Maybe you look like somebody who once did something to you or whatever. I mean, we can't go out and we can't worry about that, but we do have to ask the questions of, why am I so fearful about X? Why do I stop myself from doing X? Those are all the questions that I ask myself. And frankly, I continue to ask myself as I left my job and went into this whole world that I had no idea about and had to forge ahead like you did after your relationship and after your marriage, and you're now starting this business. And frankly, we're all having to do right now in this moment of COVID, where everything is upside down. Everything is uncertain. We have no idea where any of it is going to go at all. And the stakes feel really intense. Where do we ground? How do we ground? How do we do that? And for me, it's the combination of big, wild love and letting go that keeps me planted where I am all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that's constant is that.
Right.
It's
right.
The world will always be changing. The
Yes.
circumstances will never be 100% predictable. The only thing that you can rely on is you and your ability to process, your ability to figure out, is this going to work for me or not? How do I process this crisis? How do I process what's happening? Where do I begin and end? How do I set a boundary? How do I speak up? We can do that no matter what is happening around us.
Yes.
And if you can live your life that way, you live in integrity. You don't have these ups and downs where you're constantly feeling untethered, because we can feel untethered in a very stable society when we're making good money, when there is no COVID, when things are going as normal. We can feel like we have no grounding at all.
Right.
So, I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to read your book and go get Big Wild Love. And what I love about it also is that there's so many great exercises that you take people through. It's not just a whole bunch of stories, which the stories are great, and you're extremely inspirational, but it's also, this is a process you went through. And so you've done it, you take clients through it. It is tried and true. And I also really love how you talk about your big personality. I was listening to Modern Love has a podcast.
I love Modern Love. Yes.
So in the podcast, there's someone who's very similar to you who said that she was really struggling with finding love because she had a big personality. And she ended up meeting a man who was perfect for her. She didn't shrink for him. She really found somebody. Once she accepted, this is me, she found him just like you. And I was just thinking of you the whole time.
Yes, because I always say that my husband is the oak tree and I am the Jack Russell Terrier that jumps up and down. But could you imagine if we were both Jack Russell Terriers? Like, that just wouldn't work. So yes. God bless him.
And, right, but it's so lovely that you found your match. You found your stable oak tree.
Yes.
Who loved that you're a Jack Russell Terrier. And I think, what happens when we shrink to please somebody else is that we don't attract the right person. We attract the right person for that shrunken version of who we are, which is not going to last, and it's going to maybe work for a short time until you actually show up as yourself.
I mean, I think when we shrink for another person, we attract another shrinking person.
Yeah.
So
somebody certainly who's not right.
We're not right for them either.
Yeah.
Because we're not really being our genuine selves. Big, wild, loving people attract big, wild, loving people. It just, because our tolerance changes, that our preferences change, our tastes change. I love pizza. Like, pizza is my deathbed food. I love pizza. When I'm dying, I tell my people, see if you could get it into the feeding tube, like wrap the cheese really tight so we can slide down the tube. And about 6 months ago, I don't ever eat pizza, even though I love it for obvious reasons. But I started to loosen the rules a little bit, and I started to eat pizza more frequently. And then I realized that pizza is no longer really a food that makes me feel very good. And so sometimes I really want to have it, but I remember. So now it's just not as appealing. And that's a normal response. That's a normal response. If you are dating over and over the same people that are giving you that same sensation, and you're not having that normal response, then the question is why. So yeah, there was a reason why I told you the story of pizza.
Oh, no,
I didn't just pull it out of my, although maybe I did.
The story I'm making up about why you shared it is that often we love people who are toxic for us.
Right, there it is.
We that it's like that short-term, oh my God,
yes.
pleasure, joy, and then a heartbreak and bloating.
That's
and
it.
Really
That's it. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. That's it. That's it. That's totally it. Yes.
So next time you date a toxic person, ask yourself, is he your pizza?
Yes. Ask yourself why. Remind yourself how you feel, because there's so many times that I will say to my husband, we're going to have pizza. I want pizza tonight. I don't care. I want pizza. And then like 2 hours later, I remember, no, I don't, because that's going to be a 3-week allergy attack, and no, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. And so that's the thing, is that it's coming back to the whys, and it's remembering, and it's having those allowing yourself to have a normal response to pain, which is designed to serve us. And so until that becomes reflexive, it's being mindful of something or somebody that feels very familiar to you, that you are immediately drawn to without reason or rationale. People will say, that's magic. And I say that's a red flag. So, it's just really paying. Yeah. So that's really, again, that's big what I love. It's really paying attention to you. And am I gravitating to this because it's familiar, or am I gravitating to it because it's in my best interests?
Mm-hmm.
And letting that impulse chance. Yeah.
That is such good advice for everything. So the whole visioning process of what will it feel like after I eat the pizza? It's you can do that with what will it feel like when I'm at that wedding that I don't really want to go to, but I felt kind of obligated. What would it feel like to be on a date with this person that when I couldn't even have a good conversation on the phone? I mean, it's the writing is on the wall, and we just go, oh, well, I'm bored. I don't really have anything to do, so I'm just going to go. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm drained. I feel horrible. Right.
Or it's how will you feel when that person does the same thing at the end of the day that the others have done, and you look back and say, what's wrong with me? Or, oh, why did I do that? Why did I go out? I knew, because I know we know deep inside. See, there's always a method to my stories. There's always a method to my madness. But it's true. It really is. And it's hard. Sometimes I really want pizza, and I get really frustrated because I know that I can no longer enjoy this one of my life's simple pleasures. I cannot do it. But I'm not going to die. By saying no. Nothing bad is going to happen to me. Quite the opposite. And while, it can be hard to resist some of those things that we are naturally drawn to, if, actually in my book, I give people some charts, and as they think about, what they want and how they're going to get it. And when they create a plan, I ask them at the top of that plan to write down what was their epiphany moment that they knew they needed to change, and what did it feel like? Because you don't ever want people to forget why. Mm-hmm. Once we figure it out, it needs to be true north. It needs to be part of that. And we lose touch with it because we get so caught in the moment. We all do it. because it's a forever thing, this recognizing that the time to let go is, we're always having to manage those old beliefs, manage those old behaviors, manage that kind of scope creep, and be able to say, no, I don't want that anymore. I remember how it felt. Now I want this. And while going through all this carb withdrawal is not fun, I know that 3 days later, I'm going to feel great. So
yeah.
Now I want pizza for dinner.
I'm going to invent pizza cologne for you, and just you'll be able to experience pizza without eating it.
Oh my God. A million years ago, I remember when I was in Chicago, I saw there was a woman in Texas who was being put to death row. It was years ago. And all I remember about it is they wanted to know what her last meal was. And it was peaches and cottage cheese. I said, you know what?
Ew.
Put her down. Put her down.
Put her down.
Put her down. Peaches and cottage cheese?
Come
Are you
on.
kidding me? Pizza, brownies. How about my buddies Ben and Jerry? They could come visit. I mean, right?
Yes.
Peaches and cottage cheese. That was her last
That's like
meal.
a programmed response from somebody who's been on a diet too many
I
times.
was like, that's a Weight Watchers meeting, okay?
That's right.
No.
Go for the pizza.
Go for the pizza.
Your next book is going to be
Go for the pizza.
Think about the pizza. Don't go
Oh
for
my
the
God.
pizza.
So many. There's so many in my mind. Yes.
And with all this laughter, there are such important messages here. And I love the feelings, like you have mentioned feelings so many times. So we abandon our feelings, and that is the clue to what is important to us. How do we want to feel? That epiphany is the true north, because that's what got you to that place of, I have to change this. And so if we forget that, we start making other things more important. We eat the pizza, even though we don't really want to feel that way. So
well, yeah,
I think,
and it's also, it also for me does a lot of triggering of gratitude, when I think about that epiphany, and I think about how far I've come from that moment, and how I never really allowed myself to be in that place again. And that had nothing to do with luck or fate or, the cards or any of it. I mean, everything that we have in our lives, we choose. And so, we beat ourselves up for the bad choices, but we have to take a moment to embrace the good choices and just be with them and be grateful. And again, I will invoke COVID once again. Sometimes I take a breath and I look at my husband and I look at my dogs and I look at my home and I think, good job. Nicely done. You're okay. You're okay. You made your fair share of blunders and you pulled up, and I still do things that we all do, make mistakes, but we do need to celebrate those wins, because they inspire and empower us to keep moving and to keep on course. And it shouldn't be letting go or cultivating that big wild love should not be like an ongoing root canal. I mean, it's there at some point it should become joyful in knowing that, once you've done the hard work, you've gone through the loss, you've gone through the grief that is associated with letting go, you've looked at the mistakes and you've looked at the belief system and all the hard stuff around cultivating big wild love, then the fun stuff comes, because now you've got some really powerful tools that enable you to get to where it is you actually want to go. And maybe for the first time in your whole life, you are actually asking yourself that question of, what do I want? Because I know I never asked that question, never asked that question until I was coming out of that relationship. And I realized that I had never asked it. I never stopped to say, not in love. Do I want this? No, I met someone cute. They asked me to go on a date. They were awful. I stayed till they didn't want to be there anymore. And then I cried for them and they were awful. And I should have thrown them out of the window. Instead, I begged them to stay. And then I went right into the next awful one, and then the next awful one, and the next awful one. And subconsciously, I was like, okay, please don't be awful. I'm not going to leave if you're awful. Let me be clear. Still going to stick around, but I'm kind of hoping you won't be awful until, you know, you get to that place where you're like, you know what? No. What do I want? And now here's how I'm going to do it. Here's how I'm going to get it. So, yeah.
And the results were far better than you probably ever imagined.
Yes.
You know, I think that's the magic. That's the magic of letting go. And I think that when you don't try to control every aspect of it, you open yourself up to the amazingness of what's possible.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you let go because I got to meet you.
Yes, me too. I know. And I'm glad you got let go too, because you did over and over and over in so many ways.
Yes.
You know,
and that's how we connected.
Yes.
Yeah. Totally feel like that soul sister thing going on here.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
So Jill, tell people how they can get your book, connect with you, work with you. Where can they find you?
So, well, first of all, I love that you, in talking about your book, mentioned reviews, because reviews are like golden nickels for authors. And so you can buy my book. You could buy my book, I mean, anywhere, bookstore. You could get it, you know, wherever you shop, wherever you buy your books. Of course, you could buy it where all of my retirement funds are, which is Amazon. And I have an audio book as well, which is on Audible. So, and that was so fun. So if you like to listen to your books, you can get that on Audible and other platforms that sell audiobooks. And you can find me at letgoforit.com. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Let Go For It, and LinkedIn on Jill Sherer Murray. I am not on Twitter or TikTok. I just, no, I don't do those. They're just too much for me. But yeah, and I would love to hear from anybody, really, truly. And if you do decide to get my book and Sandy's, please leave us a review, because it really is just so meaningful for authors. It helps us not only to promote our books, but it helps other readers to find our books. And so that's always a wonderful thing, especially in this category, Big Wild Love, Woman of Value. I mean, these are really life-changing concepts, and someone's life could be so much richer for finding them. So
yes,
there you go.
Buy her book. It is fantastic. I can vouch for it. And I will leave you a review if I didn't already. And yes, thank you, Jill. You are awesome as always. I'm going to go have a pizza. And
yes, me too. No,
we bake our own pizza here, and it's
good,
amazing. And we get to control what we want on it. But it's delicious. But we try not to eat so many carbs.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening today. If you love our show, please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple Podcasts. That's one of my favorite places to receive reviews. It helps people find us. It helps more people listen to this podcast, which will help people have big, wild love. And we hope you go on your last first date very soon.